When starting a Turo fleet, one of the biggest hurdles and barriers to entry is the financial aspect of the equation. How do you pay for one Turo car, let alone financing a fleet of vehicles? And there are a lot of different ways that you could approach this. You could buy cars in cash like I do. You could finance cars. You could lease vehicles, which is something I don't really recommend, or something that has been growing in popularity in recent years is co-hosting. Co-hosting is a business model of managing other people's cars for money. And if you've done any amount of research on Turo and car sharing, chances are you've at least come across the idea of co-hosting. Over the last few months, I've gotten the pleasure to spend time with and get to know one of the largest hosts in the world, one who heavily relies on co-hosting for his growth. And so in this video, I'm going to be breaking down some of my best tips and tricks associated with starting or scaling a car sharing fleet using co-hosting as the business model. And these are tips and tricks that I've learned by not only shadowing one of the biggest hosts in the world, but also by getting a behind the scenes look at his business model over the last few months. So let's get started. Now, earlier I mentioned that if you've done any length of research on Turo and car sharing, chances are you have at the very least come across the idea and business model of co-hosting. Well, on that same note, if you have spent any amount of time on Facebook or online forums about Turo and car sharing, chances are you've probably come across Alvin. Alvin is an extremely well-respected player in the co-hosting and Turo game, and as of recording this video, he has around 220 cars and is nearing 15,000 trips on Turo. Now, Alvin was kind enough to give me his time for the sake of learning about co-hosting and making a few videos with him and his fleet, so I do want to make sure to give him a plug. If you are somebody who is interested in getting involved with Turo or car sharing, but you don't want to be the person to actually manage those cars and you just simply want to invest in vehicles, then Alvin is a great resource to get involved with Turo in a 100% passive way. With Alvin, he manages everything from A to Z, from getting your cars transported from your location to his location. He handles daily trips, damage claims, and everything in between. And so if you're interested in speaking with Alvin or exploring the idea of adding a car to his fleet, you can check him out at his website, www.rentoutmycars.com. I'll also have a link to that down in the description below. Now, I wanted to make this video from the perspective of co-hosting because even though co-hosting isn't something that I've done, nor is it something that I think I'll ever do, it's just not really something that interests me specifically, this is a question that I get asked about all the time, like on a weekly basis. This is obviously something that many people who watch my channel are very interested in, so I feel like there's a real obligation for me to learn more about this so that I can help spread some knowledge about this topic as well. And so that's why I wanted to get to know and learn from a top player in this space, because whenever it comes to co-hosting, I'm not an expert, but I know people who are, and I wanted to learn from those people. Additionally, I get asked every single week. In fact, as I'm recording this video, I got an email from somebody asking me this exact question of, hey, do you co-host cars? Can I send a car to you in Dallas and you manage it for me? I get asked this all the time, and as a result, I wanted to find a co-host that I trusted, one that I felt did a good job. That way I could refer these people who inquire with me to co-host their vehicles. I could instead refer them to Alvin, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to build a relationship with him as well, because there's a real need for a really good, trustworthy co-host, and I truly think that Alvin is one of the best, if not the best. And one last thing is I do have a deep dive day in the life of a 200 car Turo host video that I did on Alvin about a month ago. I also did a vlog when me and my husband HP visited his location. I will include links to those videos down in the description below. What I want to focus on in this video is really the tips and tricks that I've learned from Alvin if you are somebody who's wanting to start your own co-hosting operation. First is the question of acquiring cars. How do you do this? And more importantly, how do you get started? I'm a big proponent of starting out a Turo fleet with your own car first. I think it is irresponsible to use someone else's vehicle for Turo if you yourself have never operated a Turo car before. And so for the sake of not dwelling on that, I'm going to assume that this advice is going to somebody who has already at least operated one vehicle in Turo, and they're really looking for a way to scale their fleet up quickly. Now, believe it or not, with Alvin, prior to him and I connecting and me making a few videos on his fleet, Alvin's entire operations was done by word of mouth and through referrals. In fact, here you can see how his earnings have grown over the years, and this was all word of mouth. He didn't have a website until recently. He's been using his personal cell phone, no fancy sales pitch, which I think is absolutely incredible, and it really goes to show that you don't need to have a large audience in order to get started with co-hosting. And I think that one of the biggest things that I gleaned from Alvin is that people talk. If you get one investor, one person to join your fleet as a co-host, and you do a really killer job, well, that person's going to be really happy with your service. And then whenever they talk to somebody who's looking for an investment opportunity, they'll say, yeah, I'm actually co-hosting with this person out of Colorado or out of California, whatever the case is, and they're doing a great job. I'm getting this amount of ROI. And then the next person ends up inquiring, and then they both end up buying more cars, and then there's another person. There is a real domino effect to doing a very, very good job on your first investor, and then they tell their friend, and then before you know it, you have 10, 20, 30 cars. But of course, in order to accomplish this, you have to get your first investor and your first co-hosted vehicle. And in order to do this, there are a few approaches that I would try. Now, the way that Alvin has done this has been by word of mouth, but another huge factor has been Facebook groups. I mentioned earlier how if you've been on the Turo Facebook groups, you've probably seen Alvin, and that is in large part due to the fact that he's extremely active on the Facebook groups. He's plugging his business often, he's letting people know what he's doing often, and he kind of is shamelessly promoting his business. And I think that this is great because it's absolutely paid off. And while Alvin does this a lot in the Turo specific Facebook groups, there's quite a lot of them, you could also do them in investing groups that are somewhat related to car sharing, maybe automotive groups. You could even do it on Reddit or other types of forums that you may frequent. Next is social media. Love it or hate it, social media is an incredibly powerful tool. And if you are wanting to get involved in co-hosting, I do think social media is a worthwhile pursuit, but there are some different ideas that I have with that. Now, first off, you don't need to have a huge following on social media in order to make a big difference with your co-hosting game. One of my friends, somebody who I featured on the channel before, his name is David Army, West Coast Dave is his Instagram handle. Dave doesn't have a massive following, but he does have a solid, loyal following on Instagram, and this following sends him cars frequently. And this has allowed for him to grow his OPC program or other people's cars program quite a lot over the last couple of years. It's been predominantly through Instagram. But truthfully, LinkedIn is probably the avenue that I would explore if I was getting started with co-hosting today and if I didn't have this YouTube channel. If I was getting started with co-hosting today and if I didn't have the social platforms that I currently have, the approach that I would take is I would create a killer pitch, something outlining the passivity of car sharing, why co-hosting is the best route to pursue this for busy professionals, as well as a huge emphasis on the tax deductions that can come along with car sharing. I would create a killer pitch. I would create a LinkedIn profile and make my entire profile revolve around this business model. I would send this pitch via LinkedIn messages to my entire network, and I would make sure to be dedicated to growing that LinkedIn profile. There are a lot of Turo content creators on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, and I do think that to a degree it can be difficult to stand out on those platforms because of the fact that there are already so many, and because of the fact that YouTube is so hard to produce content because it's extremely time consuming. But with LinkedIn, you can almost make Instagram or TikTok style videos. You could spend a few hours a week refining your LinkedIn profile. If you have the funds, you could even hire somebody to do it for you, and you could become the go-to resource for all things Turo and car sharing on LinkedIn. Because to my knowledge, there's nobody really doing that right now, and I don't want to because I hate LinkedIn. In addition to that, I would probably try to get in touch with local accounting groups and let them know what the business of co-hosting is and how it can be a tax advantage. Now, accountants can't take referrals or kickback fees. That's illegal, but there are ways that you can legally foster that type of relationship, and that's something that I would definitely put effort into as well. These are just me brainstorming different ideas, but the point is that I wholeheartedly believe, and I think that Alvin truly proves, that you don't have to have a large social following to create a really large co-hosting fleet. Alvin has done extremely well with this business model because of really two reasons. Number one, his processes and systems are down to such a point to where he's able to run his business incredibly efficiently and profitably. And number two, he's extremely transparent, honest, and people like him. And people really look at this, they view it as a huge positive, and they sign with him. But of course, getting cars is one thing, managing them is another, and you will want to take into account the operational aspect of the equation as well. And I think in order to do this, you should ask yourself a few important questions. Number one is, who's going to manage the fleet? How can you ensure that you are fully utilized even when you're sick or out of town? This is where having a partner can help. Number two is, where are you going to park? I've made so many videos about this in the past, so I won't talk about this here. And number three, what sets you apart from other hosts from a renter's perspective? Why should a renter rent with you rather than renting with the other hundreds of hosts that are in the area? Now, Alvin does this by offering delivery both to the airport as well as within a 20-mile radius. He also has a ton of reviews, so he does look more legit over a host host with, say, 20 trips. He touts unlimited extensions, 24/7 availability, and never canceling on guests. He does a great job of highlighting why you should rent with him on his profile. And these are value adds that you can and should be playing off of. Sure, you may not have 200 cars to play with, so the ability to accommodate guests is harder when you're first starting out, but how can you offer an edge on your competition? For example, for me, even though I have a fraction of the fleet as Alvin, I offer unlimited extensions, 24/7 availability, instant booking, and cheap cars. I know how to make a profit with cheap cars, and so whenever it comes to a guest renting vehicles in the Dallas area, if they are looking for a budget vehicle, then I'm their source. And the thing is, and this will play to your advantage, is that not every host can make this work. Like instant booking, for example, I have in the past been criticized for my black and white view of instant booking and cheap prices. But guess what? Because I'm able to make instant booking work as well as keep my cars as cheap as possible, I'm able to stay booked out and I make a killing on Turo. I'm a firm believer that hosts that don't make money on Turo just haven't found the settings that work for both the guest and for them. They haven't been able to really find that sweet spot. You, like Alvin and like myself, need to find the settings that work for you, that provide you with that edge. And this really goes back to what I mentioned earlier about testing Turo with your own car. Operating a fleet and finding your edge doesn't get easier the more cars that you have. It gets harder because there's more operational factors that need to be taken into account. Work out your processes on one car, and then whenever you feel comfortable, expand from there. Go from 1 to maybe 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 50, and so on and so forth. But you don't want to jump into this with too many cars, and you don't want to be overly ambitious because you will definitely want to work out your systems and processes whenever you only have 1 or 2 cars to deal with. And the best part is that once you have this worked out and once you start getting more and more cars, you'll be able to get even more rentals because you have more cars, you have more reviews, you have more trips, and you can begin to use those factors of scale to your advantage as well. Find what works, find your edge, and scale. In addition to all of the different reasons that I've outlined so far in this video, one reason that I think Alvin does extremely well at co-hosting is he is exceptionally organized. And this is encompassed not only in his day-to-day operations, communications with his guests and his investors, but also his accounting as well. Before I would feature Alvin on my channel, I wanted to sort of vet him out a bit to see if he was who he says he was. And obviously the conclusion to that was yes, or else you wouldn't be watching this video. But in this vetting process, I spoke to some of his investors, and 2 common compliments to Alvin were his organization and his accounting. The comment that I heard quite a lot from these investors was something along the lines of, whenever it comes to Alvin, I don't ever have to worry about reminding him to do maintenance and repairs to my car. I don't ever have to ask, hey, why is this car unlisted? Because Alvin has already taken care of it. Alvin has already addressed it. Whereas in the past, I have had to remind other hosts to do these very simple things. Another compliment that I heard frequently was his books are extremely clear and easy to understand. There's never any doubt of how much money I'm earning. Now, Alvin does most of his communication through Facebook, and his accounting is through Google Sheets, and he has a CPA and a bookkeeper. And similar to the operational points that I mentioned earlier, you need to find the organizational methods that work for you and that will allow for you to stay on top of your fleet and stay on top of investor vehicles once the time comes. There are so many tools that you can use for this, from Google Sheets to QuickBooks for accounting, Facebook Messenger, Slack, Google Chat, or good old-fashioned texting for communication, Asana, Monday.com, or Notion for project management. I think that organization is such an undervalued skill in this business. Alvin is no doubt smart and he's an absolute workhorse, but his organizational skills and the methods to his madness is his foundation to his success. And I think that Turo hosts who fail at co-hosting, I'd be willing to bet that under the surface level issues, the root cause is really organization and communication. And even communication is a byproduct of organization. Alvin uses Facebook as a way to communicate with his team, letting them know when and what vehicles need to be addressed the next day and throughout the day. He has a network of shops, so it's easy to get a car turned around quickly and it can be repaired in a cost-effective way. He uses this in-depth Google Sheet, which looks something like this, but with actual data, where he has his investors laid out by car, expenses, and profit laid out in a very easy to understand way. That way he can send the applicable information out to his investors weekly. And he has an admin team that's out of country that helps with things like tolls and invoices, as well as an in-house team that helps with checking in the cars, cleaning them, and fixing them. And the thing is, I don't want you guys to look at what Alvin is doing and strive to be that today, because the reality is if you have 1 car now, it is extremely unrealistic to want to be Alvin next year. It's just not going to happen. But what I want you to take away from this video is that there are ways to operate at an extremely high level, even whenever you're first starting out. Maybe for that one-man show with only 1 car or 2, that's getting the free version of Notion or Asana, building relationships with local shops by bringing them breakfast and popping in to introduce yourself, and learning how to track expenses of 1 car. That way you'll be able to easily track expenses of 10 or 20 cars. Then once you get to 10 cars, maybe that's everything you were previously doing plus having a commercial lot. At 20, it's everything plus hiring an employee or getting a bookkeeper. What I'm trying to say is that I get told all the time, well, it's easy to be successful in Turo whenever you have a lot of cars, or it's easy to be successful in Turo if you started back in 2017. But the reality is that I just don't think that that's true. And if you are somebody who's wanting to get involved with co-hosting or Turo in 2024 and don't really know where to start, hopefully this video gave you some ideas. Now again, if you're interested in sending a vehicle to Alvin, I will have the link to his website down in the description below. On the flip side though, if you are somebody who isn't interested in sending your car to a co-host and instead you want to be the co-host, my course, the Car Sharing Masterclass, does walk you through some of the best practices on how to do this. And we recently hired a law firm to help us build out some contract templates that are used specifically for co-hosts. You can use the code OFFER100 to get $100 off. That link is down in the description below as well. Like always, you guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it, so make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell. And I will see you guys in the next video.